JJ the CPA here. Listen, the reason I'm outside, I mean, I have this in my backyard, is I was telling Amanda, I haven't been outside like twice in the last 8 days. So I probably need to get out. I'm going on 18 days of quarantine. I think I just forgot that I could be finished with quarantine. It's been working at home and we have stay at home. But nonetheless, here's what this video is about. Here's why I think the bankers are asking for more information than what is required to get the PPP loans. And so if you have a bank that's asking for more information than what is required, because I think what's clear of what is required is payroll, tax returns, right? Payroll 941s that have been filed with the IRS, which would be second, third, fourth quarter 19 and first quarter 20, right? Boom. Row 5C, Medicare wages of column 1. And then, having payroll documents that back that up to more just verify that the employees that make over $100,000 a year, that the amount above the 100 got backed out. And then the backup of the insurance premium invoices, and then the employer match. Because basically, you're taking the Medicare wages, the health insurance, and the ER, the employer match, add it together, divide it by 12 times 2.5, right? But here's why I actually think the banks are asking for more information than what is required. Because they're actually making more of a determination if they want the loan. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, a bank doesn't have to give you money just because they can, right? I mean, just because they can get money from the government to give you, okay, and make a 5% fee. So when I was talking with one of my good friends who's a banker, he had indicated, when you have a 0.5% loan rate, which means that whatever's not forgiven, you have a deferral of payment for 6 to 12 months on a PPP, and then your payments over 10 years, 4% interest rate, that's what it said in the beginning. That would be on the unforgiven amount of a PPP. But now, banks were kind of thrown a curveball here on, I believe it was yesterday, Wednesday, 4/1, that if there's an unforgiven amount, actually the loan won't be 4%, it'll be 0.5%. So what happens here is whatever's unforgiven, which just means now the business owner owes it, the bank's going to carry. Now the federal government's going to back it, which means that technically it's low risk for the bank, but the banks have to have enough reserve to back the amount of loans that they have. So let's just it's not the bank's job to be welfare. It's not the bank's job to have a heart. I talk about it in my book, JJ the CPA here, that, and you can find it on Amazon, but what I talk about there, the bank's priority is to get repaid. The bank's priority may be in their vision statement of helping people, but the only way they can help people is to get paid back. So now when you take a bank and they now have on their books 0.5, which means 0.5% loans, they got to keep reserves on their books to, in essence, back those loans. And there's only so many loans they can give out. So if they've got a bunch of 0.5% loans on their books, then that's less than they can loan out, just charging maybe what normal loans would be with 3, 4, 5%. And now listen, it's not the bank's job to have a heart. That's not their job, okay? Because a bank is not anything but a financial institution. And I'm sure there's some bankers out there that would say, you're wrong, JJ, but let's just get real for a second. If you as a bank were to loan money to somebody and there was 100% chance, a 100% chance you would not get paid back and the government wouldn't pay you. There's no way ever in 658 million years that bank would loan money to that person, because that's not their job. They're not a charity. So when you come across a bank that's asking for more information, they're being prudent. And I hate to say it this way, but if they're asking for more than what's required and you're in desperate, just go to another bank, because that bank may be making a decision on whether or not they want to go ahead and take this on, because again, whatever's unforgiven, they got to carry. Now here's the other thing, just one other aspect to this, is that, and I hadn't thought about this, but there's a bank out there, and it's the only bank that I've come across, and at first I thought, are you kidding me? Why in the world are you asking for this? Like, that's just, like, why are you asking for this? But after I thought about it, and I was talking to this client last night, it's probably 9:30 p.m., and we were talking about their number that they were putting on their PPP application. And I was like, why in the world is this bank asking for this? And here's what they were asking for. They wanted the client to do a projection of their payroll and their utilities and the interest on their loans and their mortgage, and their health the healthcare benefits, to then see what would be their expenses in the 8 weeks following when the loan was approved. And like I just said to you, I was just like, why in the world, I got it, why in the world would the bank be asking for that? And I was like, that's just rude. It's not rude. It's smart. Now here's the deal, that client will get that loan. They've been with them a long time, and it's not going to be any worries. It's a good exercise, quite frankly. I looked at that worksheet and I was like, well, this is a pretty good worksheet to try and figure out, how's this money going to get spent, so that you can kind of predict the forgivable amount. But here's why the bank did it. And you got to remember, the bank's in business to get repaid. Yes, they're going to make interest, but they at least need to get repaid. I talk about that in my book. Did I tell you? JJ the CPA. It's on Amazon. But and I put it on sale for $12.33. Usually sell it for more. I think I make $4 off of it. But what's smart about that with that bank, and I've not seen one bank, so it's almost like my opinion changed within like 28 minutes, which was like, how rude to that might be pretty smart. That might be pretty smart because, and I'll close with this, because the bank then has an indication, an idea up front, how much are they actually going to have to carry of this loan that they're giving out? Okay, this PPP. It's a program, so it's kind of like it's a gift, and then whatever's not forgiven, then it becomes a loan, but the bank is in essence stuck with that. Okay, so if they're getting ready to give out a PPP amount, of $40,000, and they're now looking at this analysis by the client, and they've let everybody go, and they're working at home, the bank's going to look at that and go, gosh, you're not going to even have any expenses that qualify in the covered period of time. So check out some other videos when I talk about that. So the bank's going to know, you know what? When this is said and done, none of this is going to get forgivable. Or based on that analysis, maybe only half of it's going to get forgiven. Because when the amount is forgiven, the government sends the bank that amount, right? So the bank gives a customer $75K, none of it's forgiven, okay? Now that bank's carrying a $75,000 loan, which affects their reserves, which affects their lending ability, okay? So when you're talking about now determining the forgiveness level, if a bank's going to loan out through the PPP $75K, and they're looking at the analysis and they're like, well, it might all be forgiven, right? Then the bank knows they're probably not going to carry that note or very little of that note. So it's not going to have a hard economic effect on them. So I get it now. I stand by my advice, which is just this, and I'll close. If you're in desperate measures, which is then the only reason that you qualify for the PPP, if you're with a bank that's asking for more than what's required, 941, and backing up the insurance and the employer match, that's a bank that's being smart. They're being cautious. There's nothing wrong with a bank looking out for themselves. Okay? But if you're in desperate measures, move on for your own sake. And the bank, that's fine. The bank's fine. They don't, they just want to get repaid. And the reason I say that is, if you're in desperate measures, it may not be a smart move for that bank to give you this money, because you may not be able to get it forgiven, and therefore the bank's now going to carry the loan. Now, you go under, government's going to make them whole. But it makes sense to me, and so I look at it as this. The banks that are asking more information, okay, want a higher hurdle for you to get over, because quite frankly, they want you to go somewhere else. They want you to go somewhere else because they are now making a good, solid, smart business decision for their bank, which is absolutely what they're required to do, on whether or not it makes sense to give you a PPP loan. And what does that mean? If you're getting a PPP loan, okay, and you're not going to get it forgiven, that actually means you're not spending it for what it's intended for, which is payroll, rent, utilities, employer match, and health insurance. So if a bank's doing an analysis and you're not going to be able to spend money on that because you've changed what you're doing, it's really smart for a bank to not take on that risk, that liability, or that customer. So I'm talking out of two sides of my mouth and saying, man, that's just smart of the banks. Makes a lot of sense, and I get it now. But I'm also saying over here, guess what? Go to a bank that's not doing that. Okay? Go to a bank that's not doing that. Doesn't mean that this bank's better or has more heart. If you ask me, it just means they're smarter. But maybe this bank's smarter too, right? So here's the deal. My clients are all affected by this that are getting it. I'm really proud. I had 3 clients I talked with yesterday, and we were walking through it. We concluded, and really they started the conversation, but they concluded that they really didn't feel like they qualified for the PPP, because the first question is, have you been adversely affected by this due to the situation that we're in? So anyways, interesting take on the banks. And I think overall what would have really been best here is if they did the PPP like they do the EIDL. They should have just scrapped the EIDL and go with the PPP directly on the SBA website. I understand the banks are needed to kind of verify some information, but it would have probably just been better to not include the banks in the scenario, because it's actually kind of putting them in position as well. All right, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my video, and just remember this: the banks are doing all they can, even if they're doing a Scooby-Doo routine. The SBA is doing a freaking phenomenal job, in my opinion, even if they can't fund on the day that they said they could. Be patient. It's coming. Don't get angry with anybody. Don't get angry with your banker. It solves nothing. It solves nothing. And then banks, all I would ask you is this: just tell the client no quicker. Just tell the client no quicker. Tell clients that aren't clients of yours, if you're not going to work with them, just don't take them on. If you're asking for extra documents to try and protect yourself, that's smart. But just then flick that client off your table quicker. Okay, that's all I'm asking. Tell those people to move along if you really don't want to do it, and all you're doing is trying to make sure you're cherry picking. And I'm not even saying that in a negative or disrespectful way, but cherry pick it and tell your cherries you're in, and tell the people that ain't to just go somewhere else. Okay, because these businesses that are starving right now need the money. They don't have time to pay somebody to put together this and put together that and put together this when their house is on fire and they need a hose. All right? So it makes sense why the banks are asking for extra. It actually makes sense. But customers, clients, people that are looking to get the loan, if they're asking for extra, move on. Banks that are asking for extra, just be more upfront and flick the clients away or the non-clients away that you really aren't going to work with, and do them a favor. All right, hey, here's what the theme of this is. Banks are working hard. SBA's working hard. Small businesses need this money. Be patient. JJ the CPA out. Please subscribe.